YouTube, today we are about to start Drift Week, which is like completely overwhelming. It's Tuesday and Drift Week starts Friday, so we have a couple days. The staff has flown in, Sai is back, so we're gonna start publishing videos constantly. And today we're meeting one of the drivers. He's a local in this area. His name is Evan Brown. He has a really cool stylized like caricature of a Euro, like really aggressive looking E36. And if you look over there, he has a super cool E38 740i. So today we're here to talk about style. We're here to talk about, you know, creating like drifting is, how do I say this? Drifting is special for various reasons. To a driver, in the moment, drifting is just you want to be on track all the time. You want as much seat time as possible. You don't want to work on the car. You don't want all that stuff. But for drifting to grow and to excite people and to be something that like gets published in magazines back in the day and have videos made about it, it can't just be missile cars flying around and things that no one wants to look at. It needs to be something that people, you know, like can attach themselves to get excited about, to put a poster on their wall, to like, you know, like
even the drivers want to be excited about their own cars when they're not on track, and just looking at an exciting car will make the whole thing more exciting. And I feel like my car is like I really tried to make it. I always tell people that I make it drive as well as it possibly can, and then I make it look as good as that will allow. So I'm not really gonna like do anything to the car that's going to affect the way that it drives or my drifting experience, because I don't want to not have fun. And I've driven slam cars. I drifted a slam drift car for years, and it's really not that great. And with this one, I decided it's going to drive good first, but it's also going to look as good as it can. You know, I'm not just going to let it go or, you know, make all the sacrifices in order to just focus on seat time. So I did put a lot of work into the aesthetics of the car.
And sponsor time, thank you so much to BC Racing Coilovers, the most supportive coilover company in the entire industry, who swept Formula D and all kinds of stuff recently, supports the grassroots scene so much. Drifting would not be the same in the United States without them, and neither would Lone Star Drift or Drift Week, so thank you so much, BC Racing Coilovers. Thank you to ECU Master for supporting another Drift Week. The other Drift Weeks would not have happened without ECU Master's support, so thank you so much, ECU Master USA. Thank you for making great products such as standalone ECUs, power distribution modules for your cars, all kinds of cool boost controllers, sensors, all kinds of stuff. Thank you so much, ECU Master. Thank you to Y-Plate Imports out of Portland. If you need an imported car from Japan before they get too crazy expensive, it is your time to buy one right now. Contact them. They'll tell you how much it is to find your car. They'll get you in touch with how to do the whole process. They'll show you auctions. They'll tell you everything. Just contact them. Also, thank you to Torco Fuels and Oils for coming on board. It is awesome to have a great company like that, both helping out with money to help throw the event, but also with product. So we'll be using their products on the trip. We're gonna incorporate them in the drag racing to see if we can get the turbo cars to go a little bit faster by adding some more boost and some more octane. So thank you so much to those guys. And thank you so much to Drift HQ. Drift HQ is bringing out the Drift Van Support Vehicle, which really helped out on Drift Week 2. They carry so much stuff. They're out of Florida. They're bringing it all the way to the Pacific Northwest. They support so many drifters from around the world. Drift HQ is a huge company now with tons of products. Go to their website, see what they sell, support the companies that support the content that you watch. Thank you so much. Did we cover them all, Sai?
Yo.
All right, back to our normally scheduled stuff. So how do you balance that? Because again, burp. I'm drinking a carbonated water. To make that work, like the lower you make a car, typically the cooler it looks.
Right.
The higher it is, typically the better it drives and everything.
Right.
There has to be a happy medium in there. Stylizing the car with, you know, fenders and body kits and stuff doesn't make it drive any better.
Not at all.
And it makes the car more fragile.
Yeah,
so
and the risk factor can definitely affect the amount of fun you're having. Because if you're out there worrying about breaking your car's aesthetics, you know, breaking off the bumpers or whatever, then you're not going to have that moment in the saddle where you're like, just you driving, drifting, tandeming, you know, you won't be quite as pure and direct, I feel like. And that is a big balance that you have to kind of learn to overcome. I think with experience, it makes that easier. You know, if you're actually comfortable in the car that you drive and you've been driving for a while and you're confident in your abilities to drive, then you can manage that and mitigate it without ruining the experience altogether. I feel like that in and of itself is very similar to the difference between driving your limit at the track and driving your limit street drifting. Whereas if you drive your limit at the track, let's be honest, most tracks you can fly off the back of the corner, and yeah, maybe you look like a dweeb for a minute, but everybody's okay. And that can be the limit. Whereas with street drifting and stuff like that, if you're drifting a downhill, you know, on-ramp with walls on both sides, the limit is the limit. Like, you can't make that mistake. And I feel like when you build your car to look really good, you just kind of have to manage the idea that you should drive it at a limit to where you are, you know, able to maintain its looks to a certain extent, or have the money and the wherewithal and the fortitude to actually get in there and repair it every time that it breaks, which a lot of people don't like to do. And, you know, so that makes the cars kind of, over time.
Even the guys that say they do, and it's important to them, if you watch them online, I don't want to call anybody out or anything, but the cars, even the most famous, like, stylized cars in the United States that were very cool, that were very aggressively driven, they can't be aggressively driven for long while keeping the car super nice, because it's so hard that it goes downhill pretty quickly. So it's always a give and take.
Right.
And it's kind of neat because I assume that, again, that you started off at a point where, since you're a style guy, the car got crazy low, and then it probably came back up. And you probably, like, you want to explain how that worked with you?
Yeah.
Like, specifically what happened?
No, yeah, definitely. So when I got into drifting, it was in 2013, and to be completely honest, I had never really been interested in cars ever in my life. And I used to be a bicycle messenger, and I was living in New York City, and I got in this really gnarly accident that I almost lost my life in. And I was in the ICU for a long time, and it took a really long time to recover, and when I got out of the whole recovery process, I felt like I was totally a different person, and I kind of felt like my days as like a bicycle messenger, like bike nut type dude is like over. I didn't want to put myself at risk, and I kind of wanted to find something else to be interested in that would kind of check all the boxes for like things that are exciting, things that are like mechanical and by nature, things that are somewhat artistic. And I kind of stumbled upon drifting, and I'm not sure, you know, how drifting through the lens kind of appeared to you in 2013, but with me, there was a lot of like emphasis on style cars, and guys like Tandem of Die, and back when Animal Style used to have their cars like this far off the ground, and I kind of I'm the type of person that just dives into things and like becomes hyper focused on them and just wants to learn everything and do everything as fast as I can. And so at that point, I was like, that's what I want to do. Those cars, I've never even seen anything like that before. Like I was never really a car guy.
So you're visually stimulated by those things, and you wanted to build something like that.
Visually stimulating as well, yeah. And then I did.
So you did, and what was it?
I actually built a 1987 Mazda RX-7 with an LS1 in it. It's made roughly about 500 all motor. It had heads and big cam, and it also had obscenely wide fenders and huge wheels, and was as low as could possibly be, and had a massive wing on the back, and full Japanese style, you know, D1 style livery with a really, really aggressive styling, and the big low-hanging body kit and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed the way that the car looked, and I did really enjoy part of the drifting experience that having that car provided me, because not to say that I liked the adoration from people, but it was fun watching people get excited about seeing that car in person. You know, when you kind of show up to a drift event with a car that's understated or that's pure function, you're not going to have a bunch of you know, like young drift fans are going to be like really excited like to see the car and look at it up close. They're kind of like, oh, that's a decent car, and they move on. And that part of it was really fun, so just to get to kind of have this car that looked like it was an RC car, like a toy car almost, but there it was in the flesh. That was really cool. On the other hand, that car just was never fun to drive. RX-7s by nature, just in my opinion, are not great drift cars. There's a few things about them that I didn't know going into building one, because I didn't know how to drift when I built one, you know, really. And what I learned over the years was that I don't really like to drive cars or drift cars with less than a 99-inch wheelbase. I feel like they get really twitchy at speed, and they're just kind of, I don't know, it feels a little bit too short for my own personal preference. And what compounded that was RX-7s, both FDs and FCs, have insanely fast steering racks. Have you ever driven one before? They're like a turn and a quarter to lock in each direction. And I had this like stereotypical like idea of drifting that was based upon all of the S-chassis footage I had watched from Japan and stuff like that, where you have this whole experience of like, you know, flicking the wheels, you know, you've got 3 turns lock to lock. There's a lot of wheel motion, and it's kind of this fluid thing. And like with RX-7s, man, I mean, they are like, you don't really flick the wheel. You just turn it, and it turns like one rotation, and you're at lock. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of like, I was feeling like I was kind of a little robbed of like the foundation of drifting that I was like pursuing. That like what was the idealized version of drifting that was in my mind wasn't what I was doing on the track, and that was prevented to me by the way I styled my car, the chassis I chose to drive, and sort of kind of what I thought I knew what was going on when I built the car, but after a few years of experience, I realized that there's a lot of things that I wouldn't have done differently, like even choose that car in general. So I just built something else.
Okay. So there's going to be 2 questions, so I don't forget them.
Yeah.
One, you're going to drive this thing on Drift Week?
Yes, sir.
Would it have been possible to drive your RX-7 on Drift Week?
Oh, 100%.
And that low, and you would have been able to drive it at Villains
reliable.
and all that kind of stuff?
I drove it at Villains.
Wow.
At their opening event.
So you could have done that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question was, man, I don't remember the second question. I get off track so fast. The second question was, so you've moved to this now.
Yeah.
Why specifically did you move to this chassis? And what influenced you to get a BMW? Are you Pacific Northwest and it's Chelsea?
I'm going to sound like such a cliche. No, Chelsea had a big, actually played a big role inadvertently in why I have an E36. It wasn't directly from him. Mm-hmm. But over the years, I like to buy and sell cars, and I'd been doing that as a hobby for within a year or so after getting into cars. I started buying different ones on the side, and like daily driving them for a couple months and selling them and stuff. And I really loved BMWs, but I was so pigeonholed in the RX-7 and the fan base that it had and the amount of money I'd had into it, which probably $60,000 by the time I was all said and done with it. And I felt this weird sense of like hesitation and abandonment toward it, where I was like, I brought you this far, I don't want to give up on you now type thing. And I finally pulled the trigger and built a 2J swapped E46 with M3 underpinnings. But I built the 2J M3 car with the same stylistic principles that I built the RX-7 with. Mm-hmm. And I hated the car. I just hated the way it drove.
Why'd you hate it?
The front wheels were way too big. It steered like shit. It was way too low. I insisted upon having like a full interior, and it was 2J swapped, so the car itself weighed 3,500 pounds. Mm-hmm. And it was on a single turbo and a link, but it was tuned to about 380 wheel horsepower, which on a 3,500 pound car with 12-inch wide rear wheels, it was just a pig. Like, I would have to like clutch kick it multiple times through corners to keep it in drift and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was so cumbersome coming from, my RX-7 was 2,700 pounds and it was 500 horsepower. I think it felt like it would do wheelies, you know? And I built this E46, and I was literally like, I was on a cross-country drifting trip with it, and I was so disappointed in myself. And I actually blew up the 2J in Alabama at Mid-Pond. And I was staying with the Chase Bays guys, the employees in Chase, and they were kind of my liaisons down there. They were showing me around and kind of, you know, helping me get settled down in that area. And I got to know them during that time, and I love all those guys, by the way. And actually, without asking, I was sitting there in the pits being bummed out, and one of their employees, Johnny Wilds, won Chelsea's Stancer Dancer giveaway car. Just completely randomly, and without telling me, he literally drove it. He drove back to his house, drove it to Mid Pond, and just appeared with it in a helmet in hand and said, "Hey, here are the keys. I don't want you to come this far and not get to drive, so you can drive my drift car." And I literally hopped in. I hopped into it. It's just an M50 car, really simple, not very much power, like 160 horsepower. The seat was in terrible position. Like, it was so close to the steering wheel and it was straight up and down. I was driving it like this. But I did like 4 laps in that car, and it was what I realized at that moment was that I had an equal amount of fun or more fun in that car than I've ever had in any of my other drift cars, no matter how much money I put into them or how much power they had. All of that was completely irrelevant.
Why was that?
Just because the car was just, you can just drive it flat out all the time. It doesn't wear tires at all. So you can just drive cars like this endlessly, comparatively speaking. Mm-hmm. You can, if you know how to drive cars with a little more horsepower, you know, I'm no FD pro or anything, but I can make my way around a 300 to 500 horsepower car. And if you can drive those cars with confidence, you can drive a 160 horsepower car with like 200% confidence, because all the movements are so much slower, comparatively speaking, that, I mean, you can really drive them hard, you know, like to the car's limit at every moment, which is really rewarding, rather than having to...
So you liked like this car, which is a 328, more than your 500 horsepower RX-7 more than your 2J E46.
Oh, 100 times over.
That breaks people's hearts that are still in the build process, that think that they're building something amazing.
It's not too late.
And then end up like, you know, they're just like a stock 328, or not stock, but you know, like a 328 is better from the factory with just like...
Dude, I hate to admit it, man, because I was that guy. I spent all the money, and oh, sorry if that's my phone. You can just click it to silent. My bad, man. So sorry.
Keep going.
And so, yeah, like, I was that guy. Like, I had this notion that I like had to have this high horsepower car to have fun, and I know that's a common theme on your channel, so we don't need to be...
I don't try and harp on that all the time.
We don't need to beat a dead horse.
It just happens to be that way. Yeah, we're not beating a dead horse. I was just asking you about stuff.
No, for sure.
So we don't beat that dead horse and everything. I'll start moving the conversation.
No, that's fine, yeah.
So I was talking to him earlier, and he flips cars, correct?
Yeah, it kind of started out as a hobby and became something.
So you're flipping like older BMWs and older Mercedes and things like that?
Yeah, I used to just buy whatever I could think I could make money on years ago, and I sort of I don't know. I read in an article one time that some guy was talking about opening a car dealership, and he said, if you think a car is cool, there's chances are that somebody else does too. It was a really simple statement, but then it kind of got me thinking, and I just started buying the cars that I liked. And if I like to choose like clean, low mileage examples if I can, or ones with nice, tasteful modifications and stuff like that. And for the last couple of years, I mainly just buy cars that I would personally own or be excited about, and find new homes for them, or repair them and sell them, or send them to other parts of the country where the market's a lot more competitive than it is here. And yeah, it's been fun. How
do you sell old drift cars, or old BMWs and everything that are so prone to break? And especially when you're flipping cars that are modified and stuff, how are you not selling cars that break immediately?
Well, I actually...
funny story.
That's a good question.
They do.
No, I actually have a mechanic that I send every single car that I sell through him for a full inspection and service for just about every single car that I sell. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's obviously the occasional car, like, for example, the last one I sold was this one-owner, 130,000-mile E36. It was just mint condition, and nothing was wrong with it. And, there's no real need to service that car outside of checking its fluids and this and that. But I definitely do my due diligence and make sure that all the cars that pass through my hands leave me in much better condition than I found them in. And it's very not uncommon for me to do an engine swap or a head replacement or a new head gasket or a rear subframe repair, or it all kind of depends on the margin of how cheaply you get the car. And I do a pretty thorough, I'll look a car over real good and before I buy it, and if it needs a major repair, then I'll perform it and on it will go. And with that being said, I haven't had a lot of unhappy people, and the people that I've made unhappy through inadvertently or however, I just will offer to buy the car back.
Okay. But what if you ship it somewhere, and shipping it back, you would lose pretty massive money?
I'm very, very thorough when it comes to shipping cars to people. Okay. I make sure that we go through I say, I'm going to describe to you in detail every flaw this car has, no matter how slight it is, that I can think of. And then that usually follows with a question along the lines of, now, I want you to tell me if there's anything about a car that is a deal breaker for you, no matter how slight, even if, if the volume knob doesn't turn the radio up enough, that's a deal breaker for you, then
you're like, all right, it's an E36, none of the windows work, none of the door locks work. No, yeah. You're like, the fan is broken, the head gasket's blown.
No, man,
subframes are blown out.
For sure. No.
All right, so let's talk about something else real quick.
Yeah, sure, man.
So I think what makes you special for this trip probably is that you have a stylized E36 that's kind of a caricature of a European 1990s, 1980s era build. It looks very cool. The lighting in here is very good, so the car is displayed very well. You're combining Japanese style with the wheels, with the kind of the theme of Germans didn't modify the cars like this. This is a Japanese themed rice fest that makes it look really cool and stuff. With Japanese wheels, Japanese wide body, which is all this stuff. You kind of combine all these things that you maybe learned on the RX-7 of how to appeal to an audience so that the Instagram generation likes you and everything. Are you selling this stuff? Are you making it? Because I know you said you made it. I don't know if you're selling it and everything yet.
Yeah.
Are you selling it just to customers as here's a fender, go install it? Are you going to put this on the cars and sell turnkey cars that are stylized?
Yeah,
Is it cost effective to do it? Just kind of tell me that.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Well, I'm definitely, I wanted to start making parts for this car, and mainly because I wasn't able to find the parts that I like to put on this car easily. And when I do find them, they're so expensive that I don't want to ruin them drifting. And for example, I like to run an AC Schnitzer rear bumper cover on this car. I just think it's the perfect rear bumper for E36. It's just enough without being too much, and they're getting so hard to find that even a 20-year-old one that's all warped and old and shitty is $600 to $800. And then you start to add exhaust heat from drifting. You drag it on the wall a few times, and there you go and ruin it. And if you want to find another one, back to the marketplace you go to search, endlessly and hope for the best. And so I finally kind of got tired of that game after going through about 2 of them. So I actually found a mint condition one in Tennessee, and I had it sent to me on a Greyhound bus, and I took it down to my manufacturer, and I had him make a fiberglass mold of it. And the part itself is 15 or 20 years discontinued, so I don't really feel any guilt about copying that part, because
you're saving the culture at that
point. An AC Schnitzer
isn't the culture. You're saving that, the ability for people to run that part now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now it's affordable and it's available. So it's if somebody wants to run that part, they don't have to search for it months like I did, or deal with some sketchy, will you please ship this to me? I don't know if you've ever shipped large parts, but a lot of people don't like to send big stuff in the mail. It's a pain.
I ship cars.
Yeah,
from Japan. No,
I hear you.
I've done a lot of different stuff, so yeah.
Yeah, so I just decided, I started out with the rear bumper cover, and it's really nice to have access to that, and that kind of got me thinking about other things that I'd like to see for E36 that don't really exist yet, which is kind of how I ended up making these vented fenders that I've got on the car. They're custom fenders that I made, but the fender vents are from a really, really rare set of 1990s Tom's Motorsports E36 racing fenders. And so that's actually the original vent. I actually tracked a set down, and when I got them in the mail, I realized that they weren't any wider than the stock fender at all, not at all. And I was like, okay, well, I guess wide cars weren't really the fashion back then, you know, so they weren't really useful to me. The vents looked cool, and so I said, well, you know, I'm going to make this a part that would be popular in today's, you know, ecosystem. And so my really good friend Paul, Wise Concepts in Bend, Oregon, he's fiberglass god. He whipped me up the 50 millimeter wide version of the original Tom's Motorsport fender, and we lopped the bottom off so it can be attached to a stock fender, which is kind of how people do the wide fenders with E36. It's not like a full fender, and so we just started making those. So it's fun to do, you know.
And are you going to be selling this as like a turnkey car package kind of thing and do it all, or is that not cost effective?
Well, yeah. Thanks.
I don't mean taking somebody else's car.
No, I know what you mean.
Buying a car and then selling it completely finished.
Well, I actually, when I first decided to start a special interest car dealership, one of my main focuses was to eventually be able to offer some type of turnkey branded, like aesthetic drift car option that's like a seat time car that doesn't break the bank. Like something that you can literally just pick your color, pick your wheels, pick your seat, you know, pick your level of, like, whether you want a budget angle kit or the nicest stuff, or a budget coilover or the nicest one, you know, and you know, you take delivery of it in 3 to 4 months or however long it takes. And I don't know if you've been keeping an eye on the E36 market, but it's like going crazy right now.
I just sold a couple M3s, and like one of them I sold that was really good looking. I sold it for $6,000 with like an SLR kit and everything.
That's a great deal.
And then I sold, it was like really good.
That would sell for 10 around here.
It was a really good like 50-footer car, but like, you know, really good looking. Right. And then I sold a really rough one with a blown head gasket, but it was like wide body, like full-on drift car that I really enjoyed driving. But it was real rough, and I sold that one for like $3,800.
Yeah, exactly.
But it had $1,200 of wheels on it. You know?
Right. Well, when I first got the idea to do what you were describing, it was about 1.5 years ago, and the market was a lot different then. Cars were even a lot cheaper a year ago than they are now. And I priced everything out. I made a big old spreadsheet, and I figured out the labor costs and all of the parts costs and this and that and the other thing. And I determined at that moment that I would be able to turn the car at a profit, but the profit margin was small enough that's a lot of work to come away with $1,200 to $1,500 in profit. How much would you sell that car for if someone wanted it? Well, let's not say the wheels, because the wheels are probably pretty expensive, but as it sits just like that for a 328i, how much would you flip that car for? Not that you know, like you have to do it profitably. I hear you. My car specifically, there's no way I would sell it for a dime less than like $10,000, even if it wasn't my car. Just simply because it has like plated subframe reinforcements, all solid bushings. It has dual caliper system. It has a half cage with door bars, which is kind of a strange fashion up here. I got the car that way, but it all roots back to the Evergreen Speedway tandem rules. Apparently, you need to have a door bar. No, it makes sense. I get it. It's kind of nice because you don't bump your head. So it's nice for street cars. Yeah, and people say that it's unsafe to drive fully caged cars in the street if you're not wearing a helmet. And this car doesn't have like a A-pillar bar and stuff like that, so I don't really mind it. But yeah, I think that, you know, and it's got an S52 swap in it, and so it's almost an M3. Yeah, it's basically. I want to interject for a second and I've been letting you talk most of the time. Yeah. So what he's talking about reminds me a lot about, I had a friend that used to help me with things, and you set yourself up for failure when you try and specialize in too many different things, and the customers aren't specialized and they don't understand either. So like if a shop or someone that works on cars is like, I'll swap in a JZ, a V8, an SR, a rotary, I'll do big turbo kits, I'll do stock engine, I'll do anything. I don't care. I can do it all. You know that guy's kind of full of it, because there's no way that you have everything in stock to do this stuff quickly or effectively. The level of expertise. The level of expertise, all of those things. Whereas, so like, you know, it's just, you know, it's going to be a failure in advance, and it kind of, I mean, I didn't know at the time, but I kind of did, and I begged the person to do it, you know, like specialize in something, and they wouldn't. And I kind of gained that thought process when I went to Japan for the first time. MCR factory, I was over there, and like you can have exactly what they had almost. You know, like you can have the body kit that he runs, you can have the turbo setup he runs, the drivetrain he runs,
they won't even sell you necessarily anything that they're not good at. They won't work on rotary cars. They won't work on JZ cars back then. Like, they specialize. And the driver is like, well, I won't sell you that angle kit because I don't have a lot of experience with it, and I don't know how to align it and everything. And here in America, if you go to a shop, they're like, I'll install any angle kit you want, and I'll do this. And they can't tell you if it's going to work or not and have experience when you go to the track. And like, if you go to, I don't want to put words in Yokoi's mouth or anything from MCR Factory, but if somebody goes to him, they want his knowledge as a D1 driver and his experience with like everything that he's done, his exact experience. They don't want his rotary advice, you know, because he doesn't have it. They want his exact SR advice from his car in D1 street legal or, you know, whatever. And they just don't do that here.
Yeah.
Or they don't do it as much.
There's something virtuous about staying in your lane and becoming the master of, like, you know, one
little thing.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, and to bump in your thing again, I started drifting in 2003 in a E36 M3 and also a Skyline and R33, and I ruined both by over modifying them, which is again to my over modification fetish or whatever, talking about it. But I supercharged immediately and put big brakes and all that stuff, and like, you now know, you're like, oh man, if you put a Dyna non-intercooler supercharger on there, like, you just ruined the car and you can't hot lap it and all these things. 100%. But back then, that was the jam. Like, there was nothing else you could get back then. There was nothing better than that.
No, I hear you.
And they were the most trusted. So even trusting Dynan back then or whatever was a huge mistake, and they were terrible company at the time, I guess. I don't want to call them terrible company, but you know, like, it's just not great. Like, BMW made way danker stuff. Anyway, I'm just harping on something.
You know, one thing I will say is that throughout this entire, like, my whole love affair with the E36, Chelsea, despite being a very busy guy, has responded to.
He's had the time to yell at me.
He's had the time to help me a lot in terms of, like, learning how to build this car. And to be honest, like, I did take all of his advice because I know he loves those things. And I like told him, I was like, dude, like, I drove your giveaway car. I'm going there. Like, this is when I had the E46, the M3 car, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna build an E36. And so I just kind of followed his lead because he has actual experience with these cars. Because, like you were saying, he sticks to, like, the stuff that he likes and that he knows, and it's a good recipe, and it's simple, really simple.
To finish off this video, two things. One, we're gonna have you walk around the car, and I want you to tell us what makes this car special. You can talk about body panels, you can point out engine modifications, you can tell people where not to go on the car as well. You're like, hey, stop here on the engine. You don't need a header, or you do need a header, or you do need exhaust, or you know what I mean? Like, those types of things. What's important, how to set up the interior of the car, what to pull out, what not. But before we get there, what do you think about street takeovers?
Oh, man. Here we go.
Come on.
Okay, so street takeovers are affecting car culture in an incredibly negative way. And I've spoken out about it before on my platform, a smaller Instagram platform, because of some terrible stuff that keeps happening in the Portland area that's affecting my way of life. And it's also this really, like, morbid, terrible stuff. Like, for example, it kind of will disappear from the news for a little while, and then the last time that I finally got so upset about it that I spoke out about it was that someone had been cut in half by two racing motorcycles because he was playing chicken with them, and he ran out in front of these motorcycles, and he didn't realize they were going 160 miles per hour, and they cut this dude in half. And the passers-by and the observers and stuff were just casually filming this guy's, like, torso in the street on Snapchat. And
was this a takeover?
It's like there's like a street racing / takeover / sideshow type event here in Portland. I'm not going to name its name. I don't want to give it a platform of any kind. But and you know, that was kind of like another day at work for the people there. And there's very often violence, shootings, fights, police chases. Sometimes people will lose control of their cars and they'll literally take out like 10 parked cars in like industrial areas in Portland where like regular working class people are working graveyard and stuff like that. And yeah, overall, I think that that type of behavior is going to eventually turn really like wonderful car culture that we have here in the Pacific Northwest into one of the situations like California and other states where if your car's lowered, if it has a muffler on it, you know, if it even sounds turbocharged at all, you're getting pulled over, you're getting your car inspected, and potentially getting it either impounded, taken away, seized, what have you. And, you know, I feel like that type of like reckless, illegal type stuff that's not done responsibly, because, you know, I street drift and a lot of people street drift and I support street drifting 100%. But, you know, when it's taken to that extreme and there's that like mob mentality of like this like violence and like all this like crazy shit that happens at these takeover events, that's eventually going to trickle down into other aspects of car culture as a whole through legislation and attention from the police and stuff that's eventually going to affect those of us that engage in legal motorsports 95% of the time. You know, it's not like I don't clutch kick a corner here and there, but like I go to the track and I try to contribute to drifting and motorsports culture as much as I can allow, you know, and I just want to be able to continue to do that, and I want all the people that love it to be able to continue to do that.
Okay, let's look at your car.
All right.
And tell me what the first thing that's going to break on this thing during Drift Week. What's your first breakage going to be?
Well, I don't know.
And are you going to total it at Villains?
No, I'm not. I'm going to drive really conservatively at Villains because I don't want to get sucked into the wall. I've driven there once before, so, you know, I know what it's all about. So, weak failure points. I'm going to bring 3 spare parts. I'm going to bring an axle, an alternator, and a clutch disc.
Okay.
And
no tie rods?
Oh, and 2 tie rods, pardon me. Yes, and 2 tie rod outers, pardon me. Yeah, so those are the only spare parts I'm actually going to carry in the car. And reason being is that those are parts that can prevent my car from traveling or moving at all. Like I could not even drive it to the store, to the parts store. And so that I'm going to carry. The rest of the stuff I'm probably just going to buy at parts stores if it breaks, because these cars are pretty common and a lot of stuff can be bought, just about everything. Not to mention that M3 E36s or M3 engines share a ton of architecture with other parts of or other E36s. And so, you know, things like alternators, power steering pumps, coil packs, shit like that is all kind of somewhat universal and can be purchased at parts stores pretty easily.
Okay, show us around. Show us what's the most important thing.
All right, so
what's your suspension? What's your engine setup? What's the important things in the engine bay?
All right, so on BC Racing coilovers, they're custom spring rates. They're extreme lows, but they're 10K all around. So they're a soft spring. I run the fronts clicked full soft on the dampening, and I run the rears clicked half soft. I run a 7-inch 10K spring in the back with no adjuster or you know, spring perches or collars or any shit like that. So my ride height in the rear is static. It cannot be adjusted, lowered, or raised.
But it's where you like it, so
yeah, it's where I like it. And a 7-inch spring for E36 is pretty big for a lowered E36, and that gives the car a nice amount of body roll. I like a little bit of body roll. You know, I feel like slam drift cars with 20K springs like look like you're like coasting a skateboard across a Walmart parking lot when they're in drift, and I just don't really like that. And so yeah, I made the car kind of floaty and kind of the wheels definitely move. All 4 sides have like 2.5 to 3 inches of suspension travel. And I keep my car raised at a ride height to where nothing really gets rubbed or affected, but it's as low as it can be without, you know, without affecting anything. Let's see, what else? I guess I could show you guys under the hood. It's not really too pretty under there, but there's some interesting things that I did.
As you do that, it also looks like you don't run sticky tires up front at all, and your tires up front have less grip than your rear tires.
That is 100% correct. Okay. Yeah, I run a 300 treadwear front tire at 35 PSI in the dry. I do tend to run a little stickier tire aired down when I drift in the rain, which happens a lot here because front grip is kind of, you know, costly when you're when you're driving in like the rainy Pacific Northwest rain event type stuff. But yeah, just like that video Chelsea recently put out, I like the way this car drives the most with a bit of slip in the front and just regular old hard front tires, and they last forever, so that's cool.
It's interesting to see how much influence Chelsea has up here.
Oh yeah, you're telling me. So as you can see, I don't open this hood very often, only when I have to. A good drift event for me is one where I don't have to open the hood even once, where I can drive. It looks
like a completely stock engine and stock exhaust and stuff. Is it stock exhaust?
Yep.
Yeah. And he just has a little intake.
Yep, and I'm running a Lincoln Mark 8 fan. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's an absolutely massive fan. I actually run a stock radiator intentionally because a lot of people with radiator stuff, they think that a bigger radiator means more cooling, but in my experience, from what I've learned, basically the more air that passes through your radiator, the more cooling you have. And it takes air more work to pass through a super thick radiator than a thin radiator. And the stock E36 radiator is a triple pass radiator that's actually very thin. And so if you put this massive like 4,500 CFM fan behind this narrow radiator, I mean, it stays cool. Like I can drive this car in the summer, lap after lap after lap, and the temp gauge will never move for an entire drift event, like just floored every lap. And also the stock radiator makes it really easy to replace. One thing about the Lincoln Mark 8 fan, if you look over here, you have to run it off of a 200 amp relay because it's so powerful. So it kind of requires some beefy wiring and stuff like that, but it's really easy to set up. It's kind of funny when you drive through like a dusty pit because it makes your car look like a hovercraft because it's just shooting dust out all the way around it. But besides that, I run a Euro M3 expansion tank up in the upper corner of the engine bay because it just makes bleeding really easy. I don't know if you guys know about bleeding BMWs, but you gotta elevate the car or like elevate the expansion tank, and if you just jam the Euro M3 expansion tank up there, it's the highest point, fill, let it run and close it and you're good to go.
Cool.
So yeah, as far as the angle kit goes on this car, I run kind of like a weird hybrid kit. I'm not sure everyone would approve, but I really like it, so.
Amazon kit?
No, not one of those. Although if set up correctly, they can be decent. I find the biggest problem with the Amazon kits is that the soft aluminum will wallow out and the bolts will loosen, and then they'll just perpetually loosen, and nobody wants that when you're drifting, so.
You'd have to buy $45 more of hardware to fix that.
Yeah, well, and stop driving. Stopping driving sucks, but.
I'm joking.
So I run like an angle kit lower control arm. It's made by a company called CNC71 in Poland. It's made out of massive half-inch thick solid steel, and they just CNC out some holes, and it's just a flat control arm. It's 2 inches extended. But rather than running like their knuckle adapter or SLR's knuckle adapter, I actually just run a cut and welded knuckle that's actually made by Evan Bogovich down in Northern California. And I just really, really like the way that the car drives with a cut and weld style knuckle. I like my car to have a lot of steering jacking, and basically what the steering jacking will do is it will replicate the feel of caster and self-steer, because when you turn the wheel, it'll cause increasing resistance to lock because the engine is actually lifting up higher off of the ground, so that the suspension is fighting the engine's weight. But then what that translates to is that when you let go of the steering wheel at lock, the weight of the engine actually forces the wheel back to center. And so it'll make the car feel like it has fuckloads of caster, pardon my French, and you actually won't have that much caster, but it makes the car really fun to drive because you'll just wind it up to lock, chuck the wheel, it'll spin, catch it, lock, and it makes for that like really quintessential classic drifting experience, like when you kind of imagine it in your mind's eye, which is what I was going for with this car.
Can you explain this?
Oh, the M3 trim?
Fake M3
Oh,
badges?
come on. This Amazon trim. $90. And it's riveted on if you didn't notice.
I like these rear fenders a lot. How big are these?
They're like 50 millimeter, but they can be flexed, you know, to desired. I always run my rear fenders with as little hardware as possible so that they have like a lot of motion and they can kind of wrap around the tire. And it kind of lets you simulate that flush look without having to deal with any like flush problems like rubbing through your fenders or anything like that.
See the interior.
Sorry, this door's going to be a pain.
E36 things.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is a stripped out race car.
Yeah, it has carpet.
Just the back, I guess.
It has carpet. It doesn't have a center console.
I was looking back there.
Yeah. I built a little like rear bulkhead for it simply to keep the car warm. I was tired of all of the defrost heat going into my trunk and then escaping, and my car would just never get warm. So I sealed up the cabin as well as I could. I put carpet in it and run some basic door cards. Again, there's no center console because of where I like the handbrake to be, but besides that, it's actually a surprisingly drivable car. The single door bar makes it really easy to get in and out. It's kind of loud, and you know, it's got solid bushings and stuff like that. So
I was just going to ask you, how bad are the solid bushings going down the road?
For street driving, it's a pain.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes noise and stuff. They'll clack when you're like making tight turns in parking lots.
How
and
necessary
stuff.
are those for what you want to do?
Oh, 100% necessary.
Okay.
Not every bushing needs to be solid in an E36, but the rear subframe bushings do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't suffer from like the subframe ripping problem like the E46 does quite as badly. But if you do have rubber bushings and you're beating on the car all the time, you can rip the subframes out. I wouldn't personally like say that it's a must for a stock engine E36 drift car. Like it's always a good thing, you know. You always want to plate something if you can, but if you can't, and your car is just a stock M52 or M50, I wouldn't go missing events and stuff like that because your rear subframe isn't reinforced.
Cool.
This car is though, so.
So this is about 240, 250 crank horsepower.
Yeah.
It's what, 3,100 pounds or something like that.
More or less. It has a School of Drift tune on it. Chelsea was nice enough to just...
Maybe it makes like 265 horsepower.
But also his tune is like also a lot for just drivability and like reliability and stuff. Like one of the cool things about his tune is it makes your idle 900 RPM. Mm-hmm. And so what that does is that it keeps your water pump spinning when you're not drifting. So it will circulate more water and keep your car cooler in the end. So that's really cool because I don't know how many of you guys have drifted E36, but if you have a stock tune, what you'll do is you'll come off track, you'll go back into the pits, and your car will start to spike in temp, and then you have to run it at like 1,200 RPM with your foot on the pedal, like 2 or 3 minutes, and get it to cool down. With this car, you don't have to do that, so that's cool.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for sharing this with us.
Yeah, of course, man.
I love cars like this. This car, I mean, obviously I love simple cars and stuff, but you can see the joy in this car. You can see that it's like a little caricature of a, Euro race car. I love it. We modify things to the point where we don't get to enjoy the... I'm sounding like a broken record. Never mind. We're done. You have anything you want to say?
No. Thanks for letting me come along on Drift Week, man. I'm really excited, and awesome. I feel like this will be a good car for it. You know, I'm definitely not reinventing the wheel or anything, but, as far as my goals go, it would be really rewarding to not have any issues. That would be really fun. And then secondly, it will be really cool if this thing comes back into these doors in one piece and not covered in, a couple door marks are all right, but let's hope that it doesn't get
This is so cool, by the way.
Hey, thanks, man.
I love like this whole room, the atmosphere and everything. It was an old bank.
Yeah, it was an old bank.
I'm going to also go chat with some people that bought cars from you. I can't believe you can sell old 90s cars and like it works so well.
Yeah.
I think that, like, how do you say, it's such a cool model of selling that kind of stuff and you going out and finding it and then you using your social media, your Instagram and stuff to selling it. That's very interesting. I myself, have a lot of drift cars and I always am terrified to sell them. I have an R32 Skyline I keep joking about selling and stuff and I need to sell it. But an R32 is so old with so much maintenance and everything, and same with these cars. Although these are naturally aspirated and they're much better built than Nissans in some ways, I guess. I don't know.
No, yeah. I'm definitely
it's super interesting.
Try to keep people happy, and you know, I mean, if you offer someone their money back for a car, then there's really no
disincentive to doing it. Yeah, but then you got some dude joyriding your car, and then 2 days into it, they realize they can't deal with solid bushings, and they'll just peace out on it.
I have had a couple instances like that.
Because I've had a bunch of kids buy cars from me. I don't want to name any of them, but some of them still keep the cars with us and stuff. Like, and you know, they bought crazy cars for a lot of money that were like Pro 2 cars I had. And the cars were rad, but like, you can see very quickly they can't drive them to school like they thought, and like all these things. After I told them, like, there's no way you can ever drive this thing to school, you know, and just people bite off more than they can chew.
Yeah, no, the whole car biz can be really stressful. I totally understand that, and it takes a lot of learning to navigate it. But
very cool. Any other details to show? Or I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm trying to think. As far as that goes, I mean, like I said, I make all
Wait, is this not an Equip? Oh, it just has a different center.
It's a Gotti. That's actually...
What's a Gotti?
It's a 70s Corvette wheel.
What?
So it's 5x120.65.
You should be showing us stuff like that. That's interesting.
Yeah. They're kind of popular with BMW crowd, but...
Are they still buyable? And is this just a relip or how?
Yeah, it's a full relip, and they're kind of like Equip 05s, but they've got a little bit more like of a rare flair to them. And
yeah, they're cool looking. How much are they? Are they like super expensive?
Yeah, the full set was probably worth about $3,500.
Okay, so it's expensive, like Equips and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't even know how much Equips cost. I don't know. They're more? Yeah. I remember I had some, like, they used to be pretty cheap, but everything used to be cheap. I need to not say that anymore.
I guess I could mention, like, it's kind of polarizing about people how they feel about my car's styling, but I run these like 1/2-inch ABS splitters on the bottom of my skirts, and kind of gives the car the effect of being a little lower than it actually is. And also, if you drop a tire...
These look like a race car too.
Yeah, you know, they're really durable. I mean, you could freaking stand on them.
How do you mount them?
I actually just use...
sheet metal screws straight into the...
Big ones.
Oh.
Yeah, big ones. And I counter...
So they're not bolted or anything?
No.
You're like, nope,
I just countersink them into the bottom. Yeah.
Self-tappers.
It works. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily do that for somebody else, but...
You met Fielding?
The bumper's just zip tied on, keeps it simple, you know?
Let's be done.
Yeah, sure, of course.
All right. Bye, audience. Thanks.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. I want to say thank you for watching the video, and here is all the dates for Drift Week 3 out in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to be out on multiple, I think 4 public dates. You can probably see them over here. And we're going to be drifting, doing ride-alongs, entertaining you guys, driving across the country, having people walk behind me. I'll see you there. Bye.